So I would say since Rodgers is probably not going to the NFC, I can't imagine the Packers would do that. So when you start talking about teams like the Commanders or the Panthers, a team
Probably
that I
not,
could see
yeah.
signing a bridge quarterback for Reich while they draft one, those are places where I think you'd look at like a Jimmy G.
Where do you look at a Derek Carr? Is it like the whichever? Well, the Raiders are off the board, but if he doesn't go to the Jets, you think Carr's in New York?
I like him to the Bucks.
Oh,
another team. The whole NFC South needs quarterbacks, which is insane.
I know. All right, Mina's back on the show. It has been too long. It is good to see my friend. Maybe we'll see you in Phoenix. Are you excited, or like where does this rank in Super Bowl layouts? Like Phoenix versus some of these other Super Bowls we've had to go to the last couple of years.
Well, a little known fact is I'm actually from Phoenix. I went to high school in Phoenix. Yeah, so a little bit of a homecoming for me. But where I'm from is not where I'm from Gilbert, which is like a small town in the Southeast Valley. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the other person who's from there in our world. So I don't think anything's going to be there. It seems like it's going to be mostly like downtown in Scottsdale. Or as we called it when I was growing up, Snotsdale. So
Snotsdale. Wow. My parents live in Snotsdale in the winter. It's so.
I mean, I would live there now.
You're like, I want to move to Snotsdale. Yeah, Gilbert. Famous people from Gilbert.
Oh boy.
How many can
Did
you
I make
name?
it?
Celebrities from Gilbert or close to it. This is.
This is gonna be
you made it. You made it. Yeah.
Yes.
That's really good. And then you go to these. Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that
Ryan
blew my
Fitzpatrick.
mind when I saw that, yeah.
Couple TikTok stars. I have no idea who these people are. Isn't that depressing now when you look up like celebrities from or famous birthdays? I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are. We've lost it. We've lost our grip. Okay, so one of the most famous people from Gilbert. It's a big homecoming week for Mina. We'll talk about the game in a little bit. It feels like a ton of news is breaking, and I don't know where to start. Let's just start with coaches, man. I feel like the Frank Reich thing broke, and then we just stopped talking about it, but that was a shock to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't think he'd get a second chance as a head coach so quickly.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, did you? I mean, did you have that on your bingo card?
I think it felt like, I'm not an insider, but a lot of people thought he got a raw deal in Indy.
Right.
And then sort of what happened in Indy after he left kind of made him look better, I think, which can help sometimes, a little bit of a comparison. I guess I saw him that there were reports that he was interviewing for OC jobs like the Chargers, so that made it a little bit surprising, but he seems to be one of those guys who has a pretty universal approval rating around the league. So
yeah, the guys that played for him loved him. I think he could be a little bit like more of a hard ass if there were any reviews that I kind of gleaned from talking to people. But I do get the sense that he got a raw deal. I mean, like, how could you not get that sense, especially with everything that's happened since? And it feels like Indy, they've gone through the interview process 3 times. Like, what are you covering up? Are you just going to hire Saturday? Is that it?
that's what there's a lot of whispers about that.
Is that hard for you? Because, like, you got to know Jeff on ESPN, and like everybody that gets to know Jeff loves Jeff. But
I know.
this thing sucks. Objectively, it sucks.
Yeah, we were in our chat when we were talking about it. As this is kind of dragging on, it looks more likely. And I was like, I just don't want to be on TV that day when it breaks. I mean, the thing people don't understand is, speaking of universally high approval ratings, there are a lot of people at ESPN where if they got the job, not everybody would be like, oh, that guy, we love him. I mean, I think he might have been the most ESPN employee of the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Doesn't make him a good coaching candidate, or doesn't mean it was a good decision or will be a good decision. I'm just speaking to why I think the reaction has kind of been what it is in ESPN.
Is Dan Orlovsky rooting hard for Jeff Saturday so he can go be a head coach at some point here?
I don't know, man. I will say, I was talking to someone. Look, there's a lot of problems with that, the way everything went about, the Indigo went about it. And, we talk a lot about the lack of diversity in coaching hires and networking and that kind of thing. But it is an interesting thing, the idea of NFL teams hiring more former players with less experience as head coaches, it would be an interesting development, a little more like the NBA, to be honest, if they were to actually start doing that. Again, not saying it would be a good move in this particular case, but it would definitely set an unusual precedent.
Well, I do think, like, DeMeco Ryans' case, like, that's a real positive. Anybody that played with him talks about, I mean, it was like telegraphed that he was going to be a coach one day. He got people lined up. He was a leader. He got along with every corner of the locker room. Like, that's stuff that's directly applicable to you being a good coach. And so I think, like, as long as you have a resume that people can respect, maybe Ty goes to the former player in some facilities. But I don't think that's going to be the case everywhere, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It feels like, it's all about these guys that never actually played at the highest level. And I'm not throwing salt on the McVays of the world and that tree and, seemingly every boy wonder OC that they're hiring. But I think defensively especially, you might see more former players getting into coaching and finding those fast tracks.
Yeah, that's interesting. It would be probably more defensively. You're right. I mean, DeMeco, to me, was the most desirable candidate. Pretty much, like you said, I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him.
Yeah.
The defenses he coached in San Francisco, I think something that kind of, people talk about how talented that group is in San Francisco. And, when we describe them, we talk about their speed and physicality and, they play hard for him. He's also brilliant. Yeah. I'm sure when you watch them, they do a lot of cool shit on defense. Yeah. So, he seems to have it all, but he was only a coordinator for a couple of years. So, I think if anything, maybe Ty goes to the former player, but also it's very believable that he can step in right away with a little bit less experience than some.
No question. And I do think when you look at that defense, we saw it in the championship game, especially, you see like Kinlaw right off the bat getting blown off the ball and some of the issues they had on the interior. As the Eagles prepared for the Niners, and I was comparing the two D lines, like it's not even comparable, the depth that the Eagles have and, like the quality that they have left to right as you go up and down the line. Like after Nick Bosa, there's a drop-off. And, after Armstead, there's a drop-off. And like I'm not disrespecting some of the role players they have. But, you saw it too in the second level and third level more so. They had some injuries and some personnel issues that affected them when they played the best teams they played. So I do think, I don't want to make it out like DeMeco was coaching this all-star team because they were a very good defense. They have Ufanga, they've got Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, like game-changing players at each level of the defense, but their depth wasn't as good as some other teams.
Secondary, it's not that great in San Francisco. And and with the D-line, too, Chris Kasarik obviously does a phenomenal job.
He's a hell of a coach.
Bringing guys. And I've heard he's like an internal candidate for coordinator, so we'll see what
that'd be awesome.
There.
Yeah.
But, they're definitely not as deep. It felt like for years they would just bring in vets like Arden Key or, Amenahu, whatever. I don't know, just like random guys who would suddenly be awesome on that defensive line. But you're right, it really didn't compare to it's an interesting kind of team building thing. Would you rather have a superstar like Bosa? I mean, Armstead's really good. Yeah. Or a line like Philly where like everybody's good, but
I'd rather have that.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that because you talk about the luxury of trotting Brandon Graham out there who's got double-digit sacks for the first time in his career in his 30s. And, the corners obviously are very good in Philly, so that affects the way those rushers are perceived. But when you have, a guy that probably should have been in the conversation for DPOY from a production standpoint, you've got Fletcher Cox, who had 7 sacks this year. You've got Hargrave. And then you got Josh Sweat, who's like a luxury developmental piece. That's just
everybody's a luxury on that defense.
Yeah, exactly, and that helps.
We're super sidetracked, but this is gonna blow your mind. So the Eagles, I was just pulling this up for our show on Friday. The Eagles led the league in sack rate this year, right? Mm-hmm. And it's weird, it kind of flew under the radar. Like I feel like we spent so much time talking about Parsons and Bosa that like we didn't really talk about Reddick and what this Eagles line was doing. So they led the league in sack rate. The difference in sack rate. So ability to convert pressure and to bring the quarterback down. The difference between them and the number 2 team, Dallas, was the same as the gap between the number 2 team and the number 23 team.
Wow.
They were, and like you said, a lot of that is coverage too, right? But just the depth, the inability to double team a guy and be fine. It's pretty remarkable. And like weirdly, I do feel like it was kind of an under the radar storyline this year.
No question. And eventually people caught up to it, and now they're realizing, as you look at that game, and maybe we're here right now. we're here right now, so we'll sidetrack into the Super Bowl. But like, how does Kansas City get all those guys blocked? I think, they're way better off than Cincinnati would have been. But still, I mean, I think Wiley and Reddick is a mismatch a little bit. There's a few in there. I mean, it's nice to have a center like Creed Humphrey and all that stuff, but they're just, like we said, it's 5 across if they want it to be, and that's a real challenge. Do you think it'll be quick game? You think they'll be max protecting a little bit more?
I was watching the Chiefs screens yesterday for just this exact reason, because I do think that they're going to lean real, and the Chiefs have a beautiful screen game. I mean, if you like offensive line play, that Chiefs interior offensive line, I posted some clips, incredible in the screen game.
Yeah, they're terrific. They're terrific.
And that's really the strength of the line. To your point, the tackles are potentially an issue. I think especially Wiley versus Reddick is the one. I do think that they'll use a lot of screens. I think you'll see some quick game. I think you'll see a lot of RPOs. I think they'll run the ball, which is probably their biggest advantage on offense, is that interior run game. But they're going to have to really scheme it, because, this Chiefs defense is no joke.
Yeah, no question. Indy's had 3 rounds of interviews now, so we don't know what's going to happen there. We just covered that. We got Frank Reich to Carolina. Another one that I think is kind of important, and we've talked plenty about Sean Payton. I think this is a hire that gets me excited about Denver. I hate to admit that. I'm back in. I was out.
You're back in?
Yeah, I was never in, but now I'm in. With right? I mean, like, going into the season, I was like, nah, this ain't going to work. I just didn't believe in unknown commodity and Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson, who hasn't played great the last couple of years. But I think Sean can fix them. And I thought one thing that was really exciting was they have Brian Flores interviewing for that DC job. And I think that's really cool, because they have the corners and the safeties and a couple young rushers that they can play man and they can bring pressure. I know one thing that's really important in a defense like his is like a Christian Wilkins guy. They don't grow on trees. They'll have to go get a guy like that, right? Or do they have somebody in that building? But what do you make of a Brian Flores fit there, and where else? Minnesota is another place that he was floated.
Yeah, God, I'd rather be a defensive coordinator in Denver than Minnesota.
As would I.
There's a lot of talent there. To your point, I think defensive tackle and linebacker is probably where they need to bone up, but they've got the edge rushers, they've got the corners, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if at safety what the status is of some of their players, but there's a lot of talent on that side of the ball. So I think I'd be curious to see what Coach Flores does with them, because also his system's pretty different from what they've been running, which has been a little bit more like the Fangio style defense.
Right. Which might work in Miami, has been floated.
Did you like that hire?
Yeah, I mean,
I loved it.
I think it's going to work fine. I mean, I think it raised the ceiling of that team.
Same.
They can't rely on being great offensively every week, and like the fact that they, even in the playoffs, you scored 30 points against the Bills with a backup quarterback. Basically, I don't remember what the final score was, but like, who knew you'd be there? Now there were turnovers that played into that whole thing, but. I think when it became crunch time for them, obviously Tua's injuries and the defense were the issues. And it was a really talented defense. And Josh Boyer, of course, inherits the group. He was a DB coach when I was in New England. I just didn't see it working. And so it's no surprise to me that we're going to see some new blood there. I think it's going to work out. Yeah,
I'm excited about that. I think they have got – I mean, that defensive line is really talented. I mean, you got – Wilkins, I thought Jalen Phillips. I think I remember talking to you about him when he was drafted, and I really liked him.
I didn't like him. I didn't like him as much. That's the one Miami Dolphin I've been wrong about.
I've been super. Phillips. I thought he was more impressive than Chubb.
Yeah. And honestly, like, there were situations late last year where I was like, "Hey, you need him rushing outside."
Yeah.
I know you just traded for this guy, and he's a good player, but this kid's more talented, and you can see it. I mean, the way he was terrorizing Josh Allen and kind of like chasing that dude around, I'll be enjoying watching that the next 10 years in that division. So how about another coordinator, Kellen Moore? You into that? Or I feel like this is a hire the NFL has to get right. I've said this 15 times.
About the Chargers?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, well, I like that they made a change, because I found the Chargers offense pretty painful at times. And, one thing is, with Kellen Moore, the Cowboys did push the ball downfield more, which is what everybody's been wanting Justin Herbert to do. So there's that. It's interesting, right? Because, like, if you look at Kellen Moore's stint in Dallas, they had like the most explosive, efficient, one of the like 3 most efficient offenses in the NFL in just about every category, but nobody's happy with it. And to me, like there were some ups and downs. I don't know. I would put a lot more of that on, I think, roster construction, in my opinion. I'll be curious to see, you know, when you have a coordinator who played for an offensive head coach, Mike McCarthy, sometimes they make decisions and you don't know who the decision is coming from, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So I'll be curious to see, okay, now he's playing for a defensive coach, Brandon Staley. He's going to have total control.
Autonomy.
So maybe it'll be a little bit different.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, you know, what McCarthy was meddling in and what he wasn't, and now he has a chance. It seems like with Schotty coming in, that like, yeah, this seems like a hire that's like, hey, you are the de facto, well, I'm the de facto OC and you're the title holder. And Schotty spent some time in Seattle, so anything you want to tell Dallas coaches about? He spent time in St. Louis too.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think he did a decent job for a couple of those years with Russell Wilson and didn't get a lot of credit.
Enough credit, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, there were definitely some frustrations there. So
that's probably McCarthy's offense now. And so, you know, like the Kellen Moore situation, I really hope it works out. That's the guy that was talked about as a head coach. Do you ever wonder, like, when a guy takes a job like this? Now, I thought Staley was cooked, but evidently not. You know, do you ever wonder if a guy takes a job like this and he's like, okay, I could have a chance to be an interim head coach here pretty quickly?
Oh, God. Kellen Moore isn't one that I would immediately think of. Like, you know, okay, actually, when it was rumored that Reich was going to be the offensive coordinator of the Chargers, I was like, oh, you got a clock. Like, there's a sword
succession
now.
plan.
Yeah. I don't know if Moore would be the one who I would put my finger on there, but I got to think certain experienced coaches taking those jobs have that in mind.
For sure. Here's another one. I know Eric Bieniemy's name's been floated a little bit. I mean, a little bit. His name's been floated for 7 years.
Yeah.
But you know, like the Ravens offensive coordinator job, I've heard his name in connection with that job. I've heard his name in connection a little bit with the Commanders job. You know, one of those two is possibly a succession play. Not that, you know, they think Bieniemy's a head coach at this juncture, but how do you think, if you're Baltimore, all right, I want you to be Lamar Jackson. Does Eric Bieniemy excite you enough to stick around, and is the $100 million that stands between them allegedly too much to keep you there?
First of all, yeah, I mean, Eric Bieniemy I think would be a good hire for Baltimore, and I would be into it if I was Lamar. You know, I saw some reports that they were focused on guys with run experience, which Bieniemy has, but like that really struck me as being wrong-headed. First of all, you're letting go a guy who that, you know, is one of the better run game coordinators or run play callers in the NFL. So, and you're not letting him go because he couldn't call a good run game. The other thing is, like, this is gonna sound hyperbolic, but like, I could call an efficient run game with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah,
I can call counter brash. Like I can like, you know, you have an extra number. I mean, that's not the problem.
Yeah,
that's not the problem. The problem has been the pass game, and so I was really hoping they would bring in someone who could improve the pass game, which is something that Greg Roman has, you know, it's not been his strength throughout his NFL career. So if I'm Lamar Jackson, I want someone to come in and get my receivers running routes with proper depths and not running into each other. And then as far as the money goes, I always struggle to like talk about this because it's always like, who knows what matters to any particular person. And, you know, but it does seem like he should get at least as much guaranteed money as Kyler Murray and Josh Allen. So as a starting point.
I know, and that's one of those situations where you're looking at, you know, Steve and Cliff and saying, like, what the fuck were y'all doing? And that's my guy. Steve is my guy. But, yeah, you're looking at that and you're saying, damn, dude, we got to answer to that now. And, you know, like, by the way, the Ravens' second interview with Seahawks QB coach Dave Canales. You know anything about this guy?
They like him. I actually talked about him with Geno Smith a little bit at the Pro Bowl, and he spoke really highly of him.
How was that?
Oh, man. Geno's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a he have you ever met him?
Nah, but I've heard good things. He seems like an awesome dude, man. I'm super happy for him.
He's super just like calm. He has like such a calm energy, and it does feel like that kind of perspective and maturity that just comes with like lived experience. Like, you know, I mean, he was like planning for life after football. He was, you know, and he didn't sound like resentful or bitter about it. He was kind of like, this is, in the same way though, he doesn't sound surprised or like, I guess, overwhelmed by what's happened to him this year. He just seems like ready for the moment. I mean, it's crazy. What a crazy story. I find it really, in some ways it's a bummer because he probably should have gotten chances earlier. And I think there's some pretty shitty things that happen along the way. But in other ways, like, you know, I always find kind of like slightly later in life success stories really inspiring. I bet a lot of people do. And he, to me, is like the case study for that in the NFL.
The thing that sucks, as you alluded to, is he's 32. You know, had this happened at 28, he might be in line for a big deal. So what do you see happening here? And give me one scenario where Geno's not a Seahawk, as hard as this is to do hypothetically, because I think you really like him.
I think he's going to stay. Just the language coming out from him, from Seattle, from the insiders, some of the numbers being thrown around, I think are pretty reasonable. Mm-hmm. I can't remember which of the insiders tweeted something about like the low 30s, which is what it would be to franchise him. I think that's totally reasonable for Seattle. If it were to happen, you know, years is kind of a thing. You probably want a deal that's like really 2 years or whatever, but I think it seems more likely than not that it gets done, especially with Seattle dropping out of that 2 spot in the draft to 5, where they've lost a little bit of leverage there. I guess the only scenario to answer your question where I think they would maybe not want to get a longer team deal done, and he might think it's not enough or there's not enough security, is if they really fell in love with one of the quarterbacks in the draft. Right. But I kind of think that they're going to go heavy defense, which is what I would like them to do.
With the 5th pick in the 2023 draft, the Seattle Seahawks select Will Levis.
I thought you were going to say Will Anderson, and I started nodding. I was
no. Had you in the first half. Yeah. Somebody's going to fall in love with Mayo Boy, man. I don't know how high up on the board he's going to go, but the people are going to love that guy. I mean, tall.
Big arm. Josh Allen.
Good hair.
Is going to completely. Have you watched much of him?
Not enough to it's just mostly the mayonnaise, and then, you know, like the inconsistent performances at Kentucky. I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to make a college quarterback generality. There's just, you got to be. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to keep it to myself, because I was going to hold like the performance of his team against him at times, but that's not the way it is. I mean, Patrick Mahomes and Texas Tech weren't great. Wyoming didn't win a bunch of games. You know, like Kentucky just could have been, I don't know, Kentucky.
The discourse this year is going to be insane because the best quarterback is like my size.
Yeah, he is. He might be taller.
He's a little bit taller. He's petite.
Yeah, he's small.
Great kid.
Yes.
But that's going to be
a hell of
insane.
a player. But I mean, like, you are taking a big chance. So, you know, like, I think another thing with Geno is, guy's 32. How much mileage does he really have on him? I think that's the one position where if you bide your time and you get a chance late in life, so to speak, as a bridge quarterback, like, I would take into account that he hasn't played a lot of football. So maybe his 32 is like a 29 or a 30, which, of course, is a big difference. And, you know, Pete's 71. You know, like, do you, yeah, right? And he looks great, and he conducts himself like he's not 71. But, like, I think he has my energy. I'm 37. I have Pete Carroll's enery. He's 71. But, like,
I think he has more energy than you.
Than
and
me.
He's
Definitely.
more
He's 71.
dynamic.
I know.
Geno was like, we were just talking, and he was like, how can you not come in and work hard every day when you're like geriatric, that's not his words, coach is coming in and running gassers with us. Like,
it's insane. But having said that, maybe he doesn't want to start over with another quarterback, like on a, you know, like, not that he gets to make all the decisions, but hell, I want to give this one more good run. Let's build around the good young talent we have and try to win with Geno and see what happens.
That should have been the first clue, by the way, that Seattle wasn't going to rebuild because Pete Carroll wouldn't let them rebuild.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the truth. What do you think about Rodgers? He's making sure we know that the Raiders interest him. He's at a golf tournament. He's like, they're like, yeah, how's the weather out here? He's like, I know the weather's good with the Raiders. Then he hits his drive. That's not exactly how it went down. But, he can't wait to fucking, give us a cent. What do you think about Rodgers to the Raiders? The Jets are plus 250. The Raiders minus 150 at this point.
Wow.
I don't know if there's any dark horses in this race, but what do you think of the whole situation?
I mean, if I was Aaron Rodgers and I don't know what his priorities are, but if my priority was getting to the Super Bowl, I would certainly not choose the Raiders over the Jets. I think the Jets are a better team. I think you're not in a division with Patrick Mahomes. I think the Raiders have clearly still many holes on their roster. So yeah. I wouldn't do it. I would choose the Jets if I were him.
You Jets? Yeah, you would choose the Jets. I might too. I mean, the AFC East is going to be tough too now. Now, I don't know if it's going to be like Mahomes in division tough and Justin Herbert maybe improved situation in division tough. But, Miami will be good. They've shown that their floor is pretty high. I think the Patriots are going to be better. I just keep waiting for them to round this corner. It was a shit show this year, but I do think they're going to be better. And then, because who did they hire at OC?
Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge deal. And,
competence.
Competence. Yeah, somebody that's done it. It's a tougher decision than I thought, kind of going through it. But, yeah, I'd be a Jet too. Although the Devontae Adams thing, reuniting with him, it feels good, the whole thing. What is their ceiling, do you think, with the holes that they have in this roster with Aaron Rodgers, if you're looking at the Vegas Raiders in 23?
I would have them as a marginal playoff team if they had Aaron Rodgers. Dude, that defense was terrible.
I know, it was bad. I know.
Offensive line needs so much work.
My boy Max is out there doing it by himself. No disrespect to anybody else, but like...
Dude, so this is one of the interesting things about just kind of the Pro Bowl guys walking around in street clothes, basically, on the field. He is skinny. I didn't. Yeah. I mean, granted, he was standing next to Myles Garrett, which is like me standing next to you. But
that's
still, he is lean. I thought he was a lot bigger.
Yeah, he's a lean guy. I mean, he's cut like he's wiry, and he plays that way. Jared Allen, as explosive and twitchy as he was, I think part of it was he just had that wiry, long frame, and Max is the same way. And the way he gets vertical, he's definitely wiry than you think in person, but also taller than you think in person.
He's tall.
I stood next to that dude, and I was like, damn, dude. I mean, he is just – and that length, that serves him so well rushing the passer. Yeah. But there's nobody around him. You're right. And can they fill all those holes in a year? I don't know how their capital is, deep in the draft and that sort of thing. And I don't know how much cap room they have. I think they've got cap room. But, they're loaded with draft capital, according to Raiders Wire.
I just think the Jets are going to have a top 3 defense next year.
Yep.
I think that they were playing so well by the end, and they're still young. And, man, I just loved what I saw on that side of the ball from that team. So, and they're going to return people because they're so young. So if Aaron Rodgers was on the Jets, I would put them in the playoffs, no question.
I'll give you a dark horse here. Well, I don't know if people are still talking about this, but I remember people were talking about the Commanders. Not that it's like the premier destination, but in fantasy land, I don't think they'd be too bad if Rodgers. I don't think any of these teams would be bad if Rodgers. I think Rodgers can still absolutely ball out. And some of this stuff, I think I've let some of the narratives around him, as some people have let some of the narratives around him affect the way that I think we look at his ceiling going forward. But this guy can still make, I watched him a lot last year. I mean, And yeah, with regularity, the offense was not humming. But when you see the top end throws that he's still capable of making, that's what keeps you in the game.
That throw to Mercedes Lewis in the playoffs still lives rent free in my mind up the left sideline.
It's disgusting.
The Commanders have. I actually really like their wide receiver group too.
I do too. That's what I'm saying. Defense isn't as bad as
they got better.
The people out west in Vegas, but it'll be interesting to see where he shows up. And one of the biggest dominoes, I thought, for a lot of guys, including Jimmy G, who's not going to be back in San Francisco. That's another interesting one. Like as we play this game of musical chairs. Does he kind of sit and wait now and see where Rodgers went or goes? And then, I thought Brady retiring was a shock. I mean, it surprised me. That's another guy off the board.
Yeah. That
you don't have to worry about. Lamar could get tagged. All of a sudden, the craziest offseason we anticipated happening, we're one news day away from okay, Jimmy G's got every option available.
Yeah, I think one thing, so there's just way more teams that need quarterbacks than there are options. So I do think Jimmy G, Derek will have their pick of the litter.
I'm forgetting about my guy, Derek Carr.
Who's probably going to get released because of the contract stuff soon. So that could blow up.
Has to. His leverage is crazy. And then
good for him, man.
Yeah.
I am loving the Derek Carr sassy Pro Bowl tour.
Yeah, good for him. Good for him. I mean, the guy, all he's done is thrown for a ton of yards and touchdowns with bad defenses over a decade and probably been underappreciated. I mean, he's just one of these narrative guys that we built this, listen, he's not perfect at this juncture. He's probably more of a bridge or you add him to a contender. But do you think this kind of goes this way? Rodgers gets first choice, Derek probably gets second choice, and then Jimmy gets third choice?
I think so. Because I kind of think, I don't think Lamar's going anywhere. I think that would be just too much. So, yeah, I think you've got the order right. I think one important thing to note with Rodgers is it seems unlikely that the Packers will trade him in the NFC.
My guys just put Joe Flacco on the screen. What choice does Joe Flacco have? That's funny. I don't know what the suggestive Googling was there, but...
You know who I am caping for, by the way? Jacoby Brissett, who's a free agent.
Yeah.
I thought he was great this year.
He was.
And a team like San Francisco, bringing him in because they can't have enough quarterbacks is one that I would...
Yeah.
But anyways, so I would say since Rodgers is probably not going to the NFC, I can't imagine the Packers would do that. So when you start talking about teams like the Commanders or the Panthers, a team
probably
that I could see signing a bridge quarterback for Reich while they draft one, those are places where I think you'd look at a Jimmy G.
Where do you look at a Derek Carr? Is it the whichever... Well, the Raiders are off the board, but if he doesn't go to the Jets, you think Carr's in New York?
I like him to the Bucks.
Oh.
Another team. The whole NFC South needs quarterbacks, which is insane.
I know.
The Bucks, to me, are a team where I don't like Jimmy G because I think you want a guy who can push the ball downfield a little bit more to Mike Evans.
Yep.
Who knows, because they don't have an offensive coordinator, what their vision is for that offense, but I think they're a team that probably... or definitely still feels like they can win now, especially in that division. So Carr I think he would make sense for them.
It's an easy team to forget about because it kind of feels like they're about to be sold for parts because they just fell apart last year health-wise, and it ended spectacularly. But maybe they're not as bad. You look at a 3-4 window. Yeah, exactly.
Shaq's coming back.
Yep.
Offensive line will be better.
And now they're Googling Caleb Williams. That's a good suggestion for the Bucs. Just tank the shit out of this thing.
Well, that's going to be a thing. That's going to be a real thing this year.
Who do you think's going to tank the hardest? Because I can't see DeMeco tanking.
That's over.
Yeah, I think they have enough.
They're going to take quarterback.
They're going to take quarterback. They're going to take a quarterback. They have some draft capital. I think they're going to try to build some excitement. I'm sure he got some assurances that he's not going to be like everybody else. This is a real hire that they made. They don't seem to be going through the motions. I think the Rams should tank. That's I've said this a couple times. People in LA.
I don't think McVay comes back for a tank.
I think McVay came back because he kind of had to. I think he was like, "Damn, I want to do TV," and then he was like, this, the offer's not as good as I thought, or you're on TV, you know this shit. I think McVay. Yeah, McVay's not tanking. You're right, but say I was Sean McVay, and I didn't have this insatiable desire to win at all costs, and I looked at the outlook of my franchise for a couple of years. I'm going to sell some parts. I'm going to sell some parts that are going to ruffle some feathers. They already have. Like one of these Rams wire sites put up an article about I would trade Aaron Donald, I would trade Jalen Ramsey. And I might. These guys are worth something, and you don't have any capital. And I don't trust Matt Stafford for another year, like at this juncture.
Yeah, no,
physically.
I mean, there's what should they do, what will they do are two different things. I'll tell you this. Over the next couple months, as the quarterback carousel begins to spin and guys we've mentioned find homes, and then there's the draft, we will know who's tanking.
Yeah.
Because if a team like Washington or Indianapolis doesn't get a quarterback,
then
that's the team that wants Caleb Williams next year.
Yeah. And they'd be smart. I mean, I hate to tell that to the guys in the facility because I've been one of those guys, but, like, play hard. You might be here next year when Caleb Williams arrives. I mean, that's the way this thing goes now. So that'll be interesting. Okay. Real quick, as we talk about this game, and then I want to hit you with a curveball before you go. But like, how has Kansas City improved through this year defensively? They do it every year. It feels like Spags does a great job of rounding these guys into form. Like the young guys have improved and that sort of thing. But is it just development of talent, or have they changed something?
I think a lot of it is development of talent. Guys getting a little bit healthier. Guy like Trent McDuffie was out for much of the season, who I think has been excellent for them, the corner out of UW, coming back, and suddenly corners getting to kind of go into their proper places. I think the two safeties, too. I mean, this was defense that, like, they did a fair amount of rebuilding this offseason, bringing in Justin Reed to replace the Honey Badger, for example. Yep. The corners, in the freaking AFC Championship, it was like all rookies at one point. I thought they played their ass
They played really well.
That game, man.
They played really well. That was great to see for them. And then, Sky Moore has a big punt return.
Karlaftis
steps up. Like, a lot of their young talent, like Pacheco, talking about the screen game, that guy's a nightmare. So, like, their young players really do draft well, and then they develop well.
Yeah, but I do think, like, when you have that much change in an off season, as you know, it does take time.
Yeah.
But I do also think, like, Steve Spagnuolo is just like an incredible playoff individual game planner. He doesn't get enough credit for it, frankly. I mean, I thought the game plan in the Cincinnati game was spectacular and totally different from how they played them in the regular season, which is a testament to him.
Completely different, because I didn't think I know they're the Chiefs and anything can happen, but I was thinking Bengals the whole way. I mean, I just thought, hey, there's not much that they can change to the point where it looks because they busted their asses defensively the first game. I mean, they were more physical. The matchups outside were glaring. Kelsey couldn't get involved on the other side of the ball. Like, there was just a bunch of stuff that immediately the Chiefs were doing a better job of when they took the field Sunday. And I think a lot of it is it's your point, is Spags is a great matchup coach. That's a different skill than, hey, what are we running weeks 1 through 8? It's like Andy Reid with a bye. Andy Reid, that's the biggest thing that scares me for the Eagles.
I was just thinking that, from a pure talent perspective, the Eagles should dominate.
They're better.
They're better at just about the Eagles offense versus the Chiefs defense we're talking about.
Yes.
I mean, just about every position, they have a matchup advantage. Steve Spagnuolo is going to dial up some diabolical shit with pressure.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And I've seen Jalen Hurts at times struggle with certain blitzes. And I just, that's something, and Spagnuolo knows that they're outmatched and that they're going to have to turn the ball over early to have a chance, I think. So there's going to be something chaotic on that side of the ball.
Do you think the Chiefs can move the ball to the degree that they're going to need to make this a game?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's another one where I think the Eagles have a lot of talent, especially given the state of the Chiefs wide receiver room. There's some talent advantages, but I'll never bet against 15. Just, especially
not after Sunday.
And the thing is, I think back to the Tampa Super Bowl where I had the same philosophy, and I was like, oh, turns out offensive line play matters. The Chiefs' offensive line is so much better than the one that went against the Bucs. So much better.
You could see that coming a mile away against the Bucs. I just felt like there was, no matter how good Patrick Mahomes is, it was asinine to hear people pick him apart. Like, did you see that pocket? No, I didn't see the pocket. There was none.
Remember that picture where he was like falling to his right and like making it like it was like almost an amazing throw?
Yes.
I mean, he's
next level. Do you think the Eagles' trip here worries you? I mean, like, it does feel like all they've done is beat the people in front of them, and I've defended them on this point. I mean, I think part of it is like the state of the league and the state of the NFC. Unless you're playing the AFC West or the AFC East, you get a chance to play Buffalo and you get a chance to play Kansas City. There are certain teams that if they're left off your schedule, people don't perceive that you've been tested. And I felt like, hey, they beat the shit out of Minnesota. That's all they could do early in the season. And then there was a long stretch where, they got tested by Jacksonville at home, a playoff team. They were down in that game in the rain and showed some resolve and came back. They dominated their conference opponents. They got tested by the Commanders, though. They got lost to the Commanders. They get in the playoffs, and it just feels like, boom, you're in the Super Bowl, because of the way they've handled and, hey, Brock Purdy, that's good luck for them, but they created that luck. It's not like he slipped on the way to the stadium. So I do think they're lucky in that regard, but they created their own luck. How do you interpret their road to the Super Bowl, and do you think this stuff matters so much?
It matters a little bit. I mean, by most advanced metrics, they had the easiest schedule, but the Chiefs were up there as well. So, you play the guys in front of you, and then, I think the Commanders game was a little weird. There was turnovers. Right, that was a game where like they hadn't turned the ball over all season. All of a sudden, they had like a bunch of wonky turnovers or whatever.
Like Quez Watkins gets up, turns the ball over,
I
like
forgot
weird
about
shit.
Yeah, I think they would have beaten the Niners even if Brock Purdy had stayed in the game.
I agree.
Personally.
I agree.
But yeah, I think what would scare me is just the quarterback competition. But again, like that's every team who hasn't played Patrick Mahomes. So, I think, but to that same thing, like the Eagles haven't faced, or probably the Chiefs haven't faced a team quite like them that's so uniquely built either, which is what makes this game really interesting and kind of hard to project in some ways. So I don't think it matters a ton. I think it only matters insofar as like both sides will probably have a harder time than what we've seen so far, which is how Super Bowl is supposed to be.
No question. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. And you make a great point. I think on one side, it's like the overall talent level. On the other side, it's like, you have not seen this scheme. No one has yet. This thing is going to be, hot off the press, like Andy Spags chefing it up. And then also it's the quarterback, which like you can't, the best quarterback the Eagles have seen so far is probably Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, they torched him a little bit. That was a Monday or Sunday night game. I mean, but south of Aaron Rodgers, it was Kirk Cousins, I believe. So yeah, this is going to be a big test. I think they're up for it, but it's going to be a big test. Okay, Mina, this is my curveball for you. We've been doing some franchise trades in on the pod where like we talk about, hey, would this city trade this franchise to acquire another one? And Seattle has come up a lot because obviously y'all's massive need for basketball. And maybe how's hockey going? Is it going okay?
I don't know.
Would you trade? This was a proposed trade from Kingston. Seattle Mariners. I know you're going to say no because the Mariners are off the table. Would you trade the Kraken for the Sacramento Kings?
Yeah, definitely.
In a heartbeat?
I mean, that's just me. I like basketball a lot more than hockey.
What if you had to throw the Mariners in there?
No.
Okay, see, that's what I said. What about the Mariners straight up for a basketball team?
No.
She's not going to say
that. I can't. There's too, even though even
privately she might.
No, I mean, I've got too much emotionally stake. And the Mariners are getting good now, so this is like the worst possible time to trade them. If you had asked me this like 6 years ago or whatever, maybe, but... Like
in the dead of that streak.
Yeah,
absolutely. That was a fun run this offseason or this postseason.
Oh, man.
Okay,
I love the Mariners.
So as I predicted, she's not trading anybody she would just trade the hockey team, the Kraken, for a basketball team. Is there any hope for y'all getting basketball soon?
Yeah, all the NBA people say us in Vegas are going to get it soon.
Good. Can't wait. Okay, Mina, I appreciate the time. Jumped around a lot, but hope to see you in Phoenix, and go Birds. I'll just sign off with that. You don't have to. Listen to the full podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast streaming platforms. Wherever you want to get the podcast, you can get the podcast. Pretty simple. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Podcasts get pretty wild. This is real tame.